Welcome to the Lift Oneself podcast, where we break mental health stigmas through conversations. I'm your host, Nat, and we dive into topics about trauma and how it impacts the nervous system. Yet we don't just leave you there. We share insights and tools of self-care, meditation, and growth that help you be curious about your own biology. Your presence matters. Please like and subscribe to our podcast. Help our community grow. Let's get into this. Oh, and please remember to be kind to yourself. Welcome to the Lift Oneself podcast, Alison. I'm so thankful you're here with me.
Likewise, I'm glad we found each other today.
Yes, I know we're going to get into a deep dive, and I'm looking forward to it. Beforehand, are you willing to come into a guided meditation with me?
Yes, absolutely.
And for the listeners, many of you listen to this while driving or using your visual. So please do not close your eyes. I want you to be safe and those around you to be safe. Yet the other prompts that I bring Alison and myself into, you're able to follow. So Alison, I'll ask you to get comfortable in your seating, and you're going to gently close your eyes. And you're going to begin breathing in and out through your nose. And you're going to bring your awareness to watching your breath go in and out through your nose. You're not going to try and control your breath. You're just going to be aware of its rhythm while staying focused with watching your breath go in and out. There may be some sensations or feelings that are coming up in the body. Allow them to come up. You're safe to feel. You're safe to let go. Surrender the need to control. Release the need to resist, and just be. Be with your breath. Drop into your body. Keep your awareness on your breath. Keep your awareness on your breath. Continue staying focused with your breath. Continue staying focused with your breath. And at your own time and at your own pace, you're going to gently open your eyes while still staying with your breath. How's your heart doing?
It's good. It feels reminds me I should meditate more because it's just such a calming, centering experience.
That's why I bring it into the podcast, because I want to be more intentional with walking the walk with the listeners and not just giving advice of you should meditate, you should meditate. It's like, come, let's do it all together as a collective.
Mm-hmm.
Can you let the listeners know who Alison is?
Well, I'm still trying to figure that out, Nat, so I'm not certain I can. Let's see. I'm someone who's evolving. I started life out, or many years ago, with as a newly divorced mom, raising my two kids. Just recently lost my mom prior to that. And at that point in my life, I got to a point where things were good, were not for great. That caused me to start thinking there's got to be more in life, and wanting to show up as the best mom that I could. Even though I decided to leave the girls' dad, I wanted to make sure that I could provide everything for them financially, emotionally, right? So that they could have amazing lives. And that was my driver and everything, which really caused me to start going on a journey of self-development, personal development, to figure out how to get to that space so I could show up that way. And so now 20 some odd years later, my girls are both grown up and are graduating university and are out in the world following their dreams. And I met and married the love of my life. So I had a starter husband and I have a real husband. And spent most of my career at IBM leading large teams. And what I developed over the time of my skills is helping other people to kind of follow along the journey that I did. Um, I'm a person who has many, many interests, and I'm a generalist. So I'm good at a lot of things and I enjoy a lot of things, which is great. And can sometimes be a challenge because I tend to dabble in a lot of things. But the things that I'm really into, I'm very passionate about, and I do dive deep into. So if I don't know, it's kind of hard to summarize myself sometimes.
I think you did a really good job at it. And like you said, we're always evolving. So this is a version that you have right now. Come tomorrow, there may be another version. And I think that's where, if we can be in that space of not just being static, and we can allow ourselves to move, and, change the narrative every so often, change the story. What wakes you up in the morning?
Ooh, what wakes me up? You know what? I'm one of those people, I love the morning. I love the quiet and the solitude. I very rarely use an alarm. So I wake up in the morning, just really happy to greet the day. That quiet, me and my dog, having a little time before my husband gets up. But really, just kind of a joie de vivre, right? Just kind of this joy for living. But I love that time in the morning to myself, and it's quiet and just getting centered for the day.
Yeah. Before we started recording the podcast, you had shared with me that your father transitioned just recently. Are you willing to share who your father was to you and what that process looked like and how you're navigating with grief? I know it's a very loaded question with different parts, yet it's a bit of a storytelling where I'm sure some of the listeners will be able to relate to it and want to hear what your journey looks like.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. So I mentioned before that my mom passed away like more than 20 years ago, and she and I were uber, uber close. And my parents were divorced, and I was fortunate enough to have a great relationship with both my parents. But with my mom not gone, of course, that made an even closer relationship with my dad because he was the only parent that I had. And we talked every day. I mean, from the time I went to college, my father and I talked on the phone really, when I say every day, I mean, of course we missed some days, but I would say largely we talked every day. And just about life, politics, movies we enjoyed, whatever it was. And about in June of 2022, I was at an event. And in this event, the habit is to go around and say, what's great and what could you need assistance with? I hadn't thought about what did I need assistance with. And it occurred to me, my father was showing up differently. And I burst into tears, which I'm not a big crier, but what I shared with the group was, this is the beginning of the end. And it could be 10 years, but I could see him showing up differently. Little memory losses, little just things where temper that I had never seen before. Frustration, I think, is what it was. And I made the decision really right then and there to drop out of a lot of things that I do in my life that are kind of the nice to haves, not my kind of day job, if you will, but any kind of extracurricular things. Um, I work for Tony Robbins, like at events, and I decided I'm not going to do any events. I'm just going to take that time off so I could spend time with my dad. He had a stroke a month later, and fortunately, he recovered from that largely. But it just was like, you know what, you were absolutely right with what you were sensing, right? Because I am somebody who is really in tune. And one of the things that I've learned that over my life is the relationships that are most important to me is putting emphasis on those, right? I learned that a long time ago. People always say, oh, I didn't tell them I love them. I didn't tell. That's not my experience. I really emphasize and put my time and attention on those people, spend my resources with those people. So over the next 6 months, you know, the calls became more frequent. Instead of a 30-minute, we would be on the phone for 2 hours sometimes. You know, we didn't live near one another, live about 4 hours apart, but we did have more opportunities to see one another. I created those opportunities. I saw him every 4 to 6 weeks. And the day that he actually, you know, had a second stroke, we had been on the phone in the morning. Just, you know, it was like a week before Christmas, and just chit-chatting about life and what movie we had seen. And, you know, I was wrapping gifts and we were still making our Christmas plans. And a couple hours later, my stepmom called to say that she came home. She just went out for an errand and they had a massive stroke. And one thing about me is that, and this is not for everybody, but for me, I like to be with the most important people in my life when they pass away. Like, I want to be in the room with them. I just feel that people shouldn't die by themselves. And I had the incredible gift of being there when my mom passed away. I had a younger brother to pass away. And the thing that what first came to me was, again, I didn't have any like, oh, we didn't say this, or he didn't know how I felt. He knew exactly how. There was none of that. But I'm like, I'm not going to be able to be there because she says, like, it's imminent. So you know, he's 4 hours away. But then she called me later to say, well, we moved into a room. Like, moved into a room. I thought that he was, you know, essentially gone. So I like call my sister. We jump in the car, drive up the highway to go and spend that time with him. And it's funny how it worked out. I was the only person in the room with him when he passed away, because it was really, for me, that was really important. So how I've dealt with the grief is, you know, it's the sorrow that I have is largely, I just miss him. You know, I regularly am like, oh, I gotta tell my dad this, or oh, he would think this was so funny. Or those memories come up on your phone, right? The photograph that come up, and it's like, oh man, remember we did this. But I have to say too, well, it's not that I'm not grieving, I am grieving because I miss him. He was a safety net in my life. Like, I didn't really need him to be there, but you always know your dad's there, and like now he's not there. That, I think that has been one of the hardest things, next to just missing his companionship and in our daily conversations. But I think, again, because I'm so intentional about how I invest my time, that I didn't have any of those kind of regrets.
Do you feel his presence now?
Okay, so I do, because I always feel that he's with me. The reason I laughed is that yesterday, so I recently moved, and I was talking to my sister on the phone, and I was telling my sister, we were in our family, there was nothing off limits. There's like, everything is funny, you know, anything is funny. And if somebody else heard it, they'd be like, you're wildly inappropriate. Okay. But I'm talking to my sister, and at the time I was getting my hair together. I was getting my driver's license yesterday. So of course I'm like getting my makeup in my hair, because you want your picture to be perfect on your driver's license, right? So I'm doing that, having a conversation with my sister, and I made a comment, which I won't share here, but I made a comment with my sister that I was like, oh, my father would not be happy about that. But it was like a funny thing, right? So my sister and I were kind of like, yeah, dad's gonna get you, you know, whatever. Because I have another thing where we were talking about my brother before, and when my brother passed away, like a week later, I fell down the stairs. And to this day, I will tell you, my brother pushed me down the stairs. I totally believe that he pushed me down the stairs, right? Just because it would be a funny, not to really hurt me, but, you know, it was just kind of like how we would interact with one another. So I say that, and then I leave to go to the MVA to get my, you know, my license and my car registered. And when I tell you, the heavens opened and it poured rain, like torrential downpour. So I throw on my Michigan cap, I throw my coat on, I go over there, I get to the appointment, I sit down, and it's now time to take my picture. And when I tell you, this picture was unbelievably bad. I look like a heroin addict. I mean, it was like, you know, hairs like this, and it was not
It's
It
okay.
was so it was just calm. It was so bad. And I'm like, see, right there. See? Okay, I'm playing games, Dad. I'm like, so anyway, so I do unfortunately, actually I should finish that story. Unfortunately, and say that the woman took pity on me. Because it was just like we people always talk about how bad your picture is at the right. This was
Yeah.
really, this had to be in like the top worst pictures she had ever seen. She said, I'm gonna let you do one more picture. So I'm, kind of smoothing down my hair with my hands, finger combing and trying to get it together. But anyway, I do, usually not in that way. But it's like he lives in my children. He lives in me, in the way I approach finances, or just the way I think about things. I know that, I'm absolutely his legacy.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story and the laughter and having him in this conversation so that you're sharing him with us and he could be in the energy field of that storytelling and really understanding his character and how the relationship was. Grief is at first it's very prickly, yet the edge comes off, but it still has its dense moments and its prickly moments
Mhm.
to navigate through. And as you said, your mother transitioned 2 decades before, and then your little brother. So you've been navigating with grief. I just want to hold space for that and say thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that, because I'm sure some listener can relate to it and it brings them some solace that, oh, okay, it's not only me. And, find the ways that you can still find the glimmer of joy in the loss.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're welcome. Yeah, no, you know, my belief is that nothing has any meaning except the meaning you give it. And I have trained myself over time to really look for what's great about it. And I will say this about my dad, of course, I would much prefer he be here with me today. And at the same time, he was never so sick that he was suffering. He became more limited before he passed away, but he never suffered. He was never in a state of not being in control of his body or not being in control of his mind. And I feel really grateful for that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very I think it's a beautiful way to transition, because when you have illnesses and you're not having access to your function, and then that sense of helplessness and having to depend, and especially for a man, that really takes away from their pride and their dignity as a human being, because it's a real sense of helplessness.
Yeah,
Um,
actually, I just want to share something, because when you said that, you made me think of something else. About a year and a half before he passed away, we met at the University of Pennsylvania to go watch a football game that my niece's boyfriend was playing in. And he came late, and because we came from different places, and that's kind of in the middle for us. And when he came in, I kind of jumped up to run down to say, here, we're sitting over here. And as we walked up, I was walking in front of my dad, but going up the stairs, because at this point he was still a little shaky on the stairs, and I was gonna let him go before me. And he was like, no, Allison, you go. And so we did that. I sat down and I came back down because he wanted something to eat or a drink or something. And as I was going down, the fellow who was like the ticket taker security guy's older fellow, and he says, now you should let your father walk ahead of you, because he could see he was a little unsteady. And I was like, you think that he was going to let me walk behind him? He takes care of me. Like, he would never have allowed that. So when you said that, I was just thinking about that experience. And there's no way he would have, allowed me to walk behind him as if he needed me, right, to care for him. Absolutely not. Right. So you
yeah,
just reminded me of that.
yeah. And those are the things that, it can be very challenging, because when our parents get older, it's like, okay, well, it's almost like the reverse has to come, that we're to take care of them, but it can be really challenging, and they get very irritated and angry because they're like, I don't want to lose my independence. And I
Right.
don't like, this has been my responsibility the whole time. I don't know how to surrender to allow
Mhm.
somebody else to take care of me. And it's difficult to navigate through all that.
Yeah.
and still want to respect and honor them of their dignity.
So true.
So before we started recording, also, you shared another thing with me that is actually in live time right now. And that's, having to navigate through disappointment. Are you willing to share with the listeners what this is right now for you and how you're pivoting and the power of choice, how you're choosing to show up in the moment?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I hope that it does help somebody else. So I mentioned before I'm in transition. And when my dad became ill, I, pulled out of everything. So as a result, my kind of corporate side of my business, where I go in and serve in leadership groups and facilitation and those type of things, strategy development, all that, really, I stopped doing any business development. I only serviced the current work that I had. So of course, a year later, right, my business is off. And so what was great about that is that I started to really evaluate what is most important to me. What do I want to do? Right. I know the work that I do with women, I love, and that's separate, and I love that. It's not my full-time gig though. So what's my full-time thing in terms of this kind of corporate work that I've been doing? And as I really thought about it, I came up with something, and I'm going to share with you kind of when I have a process I do in the morning and I review all the things, what are the choices that I'm consciously making in life? And one of them is working in a mission-based organization, bringing my unique genius to a confident, collaborative team, creating magical solutions. And when I wrote that, I didn't really know what it meant. But a couple of people I know, I've kind of shared that with. And kind of out of the blue, someone says to me, hey, I know about this job opportunity. So I think you'd really be great for. And, I left IBM 7 years ago after spending 20 years there. And I wasn't necessarily certain that I was going to go back and get a job, but that certainly is an option versus building up my business again. I looked at the organization and I saw their mission, which I felt very tied to, which is helping people to improve their income, through some additional, work, people who haven't been to college. And I was like, wow, that really aligns with me. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to write my resume and cover letter and apply for the job. I went to look, noticed that I had a friend who is, in LinkedIn who knew somebody there. And so I got her engaged. Turns out she knew a lot about the organization. And I was incredibly pleasantly surprised and truly grateful because over the last 2 days, she really invested a lot of time and energy in helping me to get a great resume and really great cover letter. And the one thing about having worked at IBM for 20 years is that while I have a ton of experience, I haven't interviewed for a job in forever. And my resume demonstrated that. Like, I didn't know what I was doing, right? So we worked together and she really, really helped me. And I remember crawling into bed last night and saying to my husband, like, I am truly grateful. Like, because I didn't expect her to expend this much time and energy with me. It's something that I do a lot, particularly in my work with Tony Robbins. I'm with events, I'm helping people all the time, and that's what I do. But I don't have people show up I don't think most people have people show up in their lives, frankly. And I have a lot of great friends who help me, but someone who's not like my best friend, right? Just somebody who I know more casually. And I really was kind of almost moved to tears that I felt that this is really such a gift that she had given me. So I get up this morning, early in the morning, I integrate all of the feedback she's given me, send it back to her for another quick round. She's got some other great distinctions. And I'm like, oh, great. I incorporate all of them. I sit down today at like about 1 o'clock to now do my formal application. And the job is gone. And I was like, oh my gosh. I went from kind of first like shock to upset to like and just thinking like, what am I going to make this mean, right? What am I going to make this mean? And I have to say, like, I mean 100% frustrated, no question about it, because here I had invested all this time and energy and really crafting what was a great, and also thinking this is a really great fit for me. There were so many things that aligned, skills that I have, also with the passion for something. I mean, it's just really, I thought, this is the job for me. If I'm going to take a job, this is the job, right? So, but what I realized too, kind of what I'm grateful for now, is that it wasn't the deep depth of despair. It wasn't that. I didn't go there. I'm still in my emotions about it, because I really was like thinking this is the right fit. I am grateful too, because I know how much work I've done on myself. So it's not that like, let me get the Haagen-Dazs out and drown my sorrows in Haagen-Dazs, or, a bottle of wine or whatever it is. And I'm not saying people shouldn't eat ice cream or drink wine. That's not my point. But, we don't want to get stuck in that place and a feeling that's our only respite. And so I really, there's another opportunity for me to be grateful, to say I've done so much work on myself that I can see that I'm not in that place, even though I'm still allowing myself the grace of feeling frustrated and disappointment, and surprise.
And you're here on a podcast with a complete stranger, being vulnerable and sharing and offering, tools to other listeners. So it shows your character and your integrity and your commitment to yourself.
Thank you for that.
Because the energy that you're bringing into this conversation, if I wouldn't have brought it up, I'm sure many of the listeners would have no idea. And I thank you for showing how we can have like such a duality, and we can have several dimensions going on simultaneously within us. And it's not ignoring any of them. It's keeping a wholeness with the W, and just, okay, how are we going to move with this? And like you said, what meaning are you going to give it? I did a podcast, I think it was like 2 days ago, and I had said, like, some things don't have meaning in life. Like, I know, spirituality and positivity want to say like everything has a meaning. And I'm like, my friend whose son was murdered, I'm going to tell her that there's meaning in that. I was like, how harmful and cruel that is? It's like, or somebody that, a child that was sexually molested, or, that there was meaning in that. So it's like, no, you have this shit that you have to process, and then you make the decision, what am I going to show up as? What am I going to do with what I have right now? And that's the alchemy. Yet it's not meaning, and it's, you make your own meaning. Yet the outside world, I think at times wants to put meaning, because they don't know how to hold space for those big emotions.
I agree.
And those dense emotions.
I agree. And you're right. I think the two examples you gave are really such great examples, not because it's not that bad things don't happen. They do happen. And, those were two horrible examples that you gave. But we all have things that happen to us, often on a daily basis. And I think the maturation, or the gift, or the opportunity we have to grow and step into, is figuring out how we're going to let that affect us. And is it going to be our story for the rest of our lives of this horrible thing that happened? And I think that's the opportunity that people have.
Yeah, of the power of choice. Yet it takes a lot of personal development to be able to face yourself.
Absolutely.
And then recognize you always have choices. How are you going to choose to show up? Are you going to allow yourself to process these emotions and then get back up and pivot yourself? Yet that takes being able to understand your biology, understand your nervous system, understand that there's big emotions that you have to allow yourself to interact with, so that they don't keep you stuck. And it's, like you said, it's not, I always want to be sure that when I'm speaking to the listeners, especially if this is a beginner person, just because we have developed tools, it's like I was there at one time, and I still could falter and end up, if some big life event, like I have children, if any of them pass away before me, I don't know how I'm going to show up. I know all the tools, yet we don't know until there's life experiences. And like you said, I get to reflect of seeing my growth. Like, I could choose all these other coping mechanisms to kind of numb what I'm feeling, but I'm actually facing it head on, and still facing the pain, and going through it because
Right.
I know that there's resilience and there's learning in this. And it's for my better good. Even though everybody wants this resilience where it's like, well, you got to go through the pain.
Right. Everybody wants the resilience without going through the pain. Like, can I just get this thing? Don't work
And
that way.
it doesn't work like that. And
Yeah.
I'm like, and what people also do, which I did, and now I can give language, is that I would avoid the pain, gather all kinds of suffering, end up at the same place that you have to go through the pain. But then you have all this suffering trying to go through this door, and it's just really difficult to get through it now. Yet you still have to go through it to be able to gather the experience and the knowledge. And again, keep yourself as a whole, as a W. And it takes, like, the work that I do with energy healing and helping people understand their biology, regulate their nervous system, and you need safety for that. And the other part of healing is radical honesty. You have
Mhm.
to be honest with yourself. And the
Mhm.
way you did that process, went through the roller coaster of all kinds of different emotions, and then faced yourself and said, like, okay, what are we going to do with this? Like, I validate this,
Mhm.
yet how are we going to pivot, and what is the choice that we're going to make?
Yeah.
So I think, thank you for that real time lesson, that
Yeah.
it's like raw, and here you are, a live event, but you can hear it in your relatability and your frequency.
Yeah, thank you. It's funny, actually, when you just said something that made me think of one other thing I wanted to share. When I remember some time ago, somebody said to me, "Oh, Alison, I have these problems. You just don't have these things. You just don't like it's not the same for you." And what she didn't know, I had two really horrible things like had just gone through. One of them being a cousin of mine was murdered. Okay, like big major things. These were not small things. And I had another, you know, having to do with my girls and their dad. But it's not that I don't go through those things. I do have those horrible experiences. And I have done the work, right, to figure out a way for me to process those things and not kind of bring that everywhere, not to stay in that suffering state. I'm bringing that everywhere I go. That's the difference. It's not that I don't have them. It's not that you don't have them. You've just developed a set of tools that allows you to process the information differently and your grief and whatever it is you're feeling very differently than most people do. And it's such a gift because now you can help other people, and you can also not be in that place of sorrow and suffering indefinitely.
I want to bring you into a reflective question. I want to ask you to bring this awareness right now and to go back to your 18-year-old self.
18, okay.
And you have 3 words to tell your 18-year-old self to carry you to the journey of right now. What would those 3 words be?
The words be um, trust in yourself, trust the process. uh I think that's would be just trust the process, right? Or everything's going to be okay. Yeah, trust the process.
Okay. Well, now I know the listeners, after hearing all of this, are going to be like, where can I find Allyson, and what does she have, and what are the services? So could you let the listeners know more about what you have to offer and where they can find you?
Yeah, sure, happy to. I guess the one thing you can do to find me is I'm very active on Instagram. And in addition to dispensing all types of ideas and help for people, I dance there with my daughter, so you can come over and see me dance. And it's just my name, Allyson Ward, on Instagram, Allyson Ward. And when you see a big dance video, then you'll know you're in the right place. But no, really, what's really there is a lot of ideas and strategies that people can use for empowerment, right? So I would say that's the first thing. And then the other thing I would say is kind of in line with what we were talking about today. I developed, after working with a bunch of, developed myself and then working with a bunch of my clients, I have a kind of planning the next 12 months, planning your ideal year program that I created. And what's great about it is it's a little bit different than maybe other planning programs people have done. And it doesn't matter if you're hearing this in January or February or April, it doesn't matter when, you can still decide to choose and be intentional about your next 12 months. And what makes it a little bit different is part of kind of, some of it will be things you've heard before, but what makes it different is one of the things I talk about is how you invest your time and with whom you invest your time. It's the last step of the process. And I know how much that's helped me because, again, I don't have to, while I miss my dad, I don't have any of the like, oh man, I should have done this. Because when you go through this process and you really start to focus in on how you're going to spend your time and with whom you're going to spend your time, it makes all the difference. And I do have a, so it's not expensive. It's like, I don't know, like $100. It's not expensive, but I also have a discount code for your listeners. And if they just type in the word podcast when they go to pay, they can get $20 off of the program. But that's been very impactful from what I hear other people do who've done the program. So that's the kind of the best way. And that's on my website at AllisonWard.com, ALLYSON, Ward, WARD.com, and just work with Alison. And I have coaching and other things there as well. But that program, based upon what we've been talking, I think is most in line with what we've been talking about, Nat.
Yeah. And for the listeners, I'll have all of the links in the show notes. So she's going to be very clickable and very reachable. And I will put that code in there too. As you heard from her own personal story, she's one that walks her talk. So to, push away all the things that she had lined up, like working with Tony Robinson, like doing these events and then choosing, no, I'm going to choose to be with my father. You actually are a lived experience of it, not just in theory or telling people what is really good. Like you have the lived practice of it. And you also know the difficulty of making those decisions also. Yet you understand the benefit of it, of that, what you are living with and being more intentional. So
Yes.
this course comes from practicality and lived experience. Being able to relate to the student that is taking it. So I highly recommend that. If anything in this podcast gave you any insights or aha moments, please reach out to Alison and gather the information. She's done a lot of alchemy. She's taken those impurities and she's turned it into gold to share with other people. And you heard the vulnerability in this conversation today, and actually a live experience that she just is processing right now in real time. So we got to be, sitting there with her and her allowing us to be in that vulnerability with her. You don't get many people that are that authentic and transparent in life. So thank you so much for this enriching conversation, Alison. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Nat. I've enjoyed the conversation and I appreciate you creating this space to do that.
Please remember to be kind to yourself.
Always good advice.
Hey, you made it all the way here. I appreciate you and your time. If you found value in this conversation, please share it out. If there was somebody that popped into your mind, take action and share it out with them. It possibly may not be them that will benefit. It's that they know somebody that will benefit from listening to this conversation. So please take action and share out the podcast. You can find us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok under LiftOneSelf. And if you want to inquire about the work that I do and the services that I provide to people, come over on my website, come into a discovery call, LiftOneSelf.com. Until next time, please remember to be kind and gentle with yourself. You matter.